So back in 2014, there was this rural janitor named Ronald Reed, and he passed away at the age of 92.
Right. The guy who worked at JCPenney.
Yeah, exactly. He spent basically his whole life sweeping floors at JCPenney, chopping his own firewood, just total relative obscurity. But when his will was read, he didn't just leave behind, his little two-bedroom house.
He left an absolute fortune.
$8 million.
It's wild.
It really is. And to understand just how wild that is, we kind of have to look at another guy from roughly the same era, Richard Fuscone. Now, this guy was a Harvard-educated MBA.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, a wildly successful Merrill Lynch executive. He actually retired in his 40s to this massive 18,000 square foot mansion. It had 2 elevators.
Of course it did.
Right. But then the 2008 financial crisis hits, and Fuscone goes completely bankrupt. The mansion gets foreclosed on for pennies.
So you've got this rural janitor who completely out-earns and outperforms a Harvard-educated finance executive.
Exactly. And today, for this deep dive, we're really unpacking why personal finance is like the only field on earth where that kind of thing actually happens all the time.
Yeah, because it completely shatters that illusion that finance is a hard science. I mean, we tend to think of money like physics or engineering, right?
Right, like if you just punch the right data into a spreadsheet, you'd get the right answer.
Exactly. But that massive gap between Ronald Reed and Richard Fuscone, it shows us that wealth is actually a soft skill. It's this behavioral landscape where how you act is just vastly more important than what you actually know.
So true. And we're pulling from 2 really incredible sources today to kind of map out this behavioral landscape for you. We've got Morgan Housel's acclaimed book, The Psychology of Money, and we're pairing that with a really practical video breakdown from the Minority Mindset YouTube channel.
Yeah, their video on the 5 dumbest things people do with money.
That's the one. And our mission for you listening today is to dissect these psychological traps that sabotage us. We want to uncover the hidden mechanisms that actually build lasting wealth.
But to do that, I mean, we have to start at the absolute beginning, right?
Just starting line.
Right, because before anyone can even think about hoarding $8 million like our janitor, you have to look at how people actively dismantle their own foundation before they even get going.
Yeah, so the Minority Mindset source frames this really well with crawl, walk, run progression.
Right, and the problem is the vast majority of people try to sprint before they've even figured out how to crawl.
Yeah.
I mean, the most glaring example of this is trying to invest while you're carrying high-interest consumer debt.
Yeah.
For you listening, if you know market averages, the math here is just painfully obvious.
Oh, for sure.
Like, if the S&P 500 averages, say, a 10% annual return, but your credit card is hitting you with 25 or 28% interest.
You're just bleeding money.
Exactly. Any money you put into the market while carrying that debt is moving you backwards so incredibly fast.
See, I struggle with that framework a little bit, though. I mean, we know people listening are financially literate. People understand basic interest rates.
Sure.
Yet we still see these brilliant professionals carrying 5-figure credit card balances just to, I don't know, finance a Cancun vacation or a depreciating luxury car.
Oh, all the time.
If the math is that obvious, how do we explain the behavior? It's almost like people treat their credit score like a high score in a video game.
Yes.
They think having an 800 FICO score means they're rich.
That video game analogy is so spot on because an excellent credit score, it doesn't measure wealth at all. It basically just measures your reliability in paying off debt.
Right.
It just unlocks the ability to take on more damage, by letting you acquire liabilities that are just dressed up as assets.
But why do smart people fall for it?
Well, it really comes down to temporal discounting. Our brains heavily favor immediate dopamine over future security. We want that beach vacation today.
And the 28% interest is, that's future me's problem.
Exactly. But Morgan Housel offers this really profound reframe for this. He argues that, while these decisions are mathematically disastrous, no one is actually crazy.
Wait, let me stop you right there. Because if someone makes $60,000 a year and finances a luxury vacation at 28%, or, I don't know, drops hundreds on lottery tickets when they don't even have an emergency fund.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems like the literal definition of crazy.
From a spreadsheet perspective, 100%. But emotionally, Housel says you have to look through the generational lens of the person making that choice. Every single person views money through this tiny sliver of history they've personally lived through.
Okay, so take the lottery ticket example.
Right. So the lowest income households in America spend roughly $400 a year on lottery tickets.
Wow.
And ironically, that is often the exact amount they fall short of in an emergency.
Which looks totally absurd on paper.
Completely absurd. But Housel points out that they aren't really buying a mathematical probability. They're buying a feeling. They're buying a tangible dream of the good life.
Like a brief moment of hope that wealthy people already take for granted.
Precisely. They're purchasing a psychological escape route. And we also suffer from this huge historical blind spot, you know. We judge ourselves for not being perfect financial machines, but we totally forget that the modern financial system is practically an infant.
What do you mean?
Well, the 401k, which is like the absolute backbone of American retirement, that was only invented in 1978.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it was that recent.
Yeah. The whole concept of saving up to relax at age 65 instead of just working until you physically can't anymore, that's barely 2 generations old. So we're essentially these 10,000-year-old domesticated brains trying to navigate a 40-year-old financial system.
So we're all just newbies flying blind.
We're all absolute newbies.
That makes me think about how we actually transition out of that newbie phase then.
Mhm.
Because once you crawl out of that high-interest debt and you build that basic emergency fund.
Right, the $2,000 for a broken AC unit, not a new Rolex.
Exactly. Once you do that, you start accumulating some real income. But then that introduces a completely new psychological trap.
The fake rich trap.
Yes, the minority mindset video hammers this idea.
Mm-hmm.
The second we get a promotion, the immediate instinct is to, go buy the BMW or the massive 4-bedroom house just to signal to everyone else that we've made it.
It's that classic error, buying liabilities and calling them assets, and the real danger is how it traps your cash flow.
So how do we fight that?
Well, the minority mindset source gives this really specific behavioral guardrail, the 7-5-1-5-10 rule.
Okay, break that down for me.
Sure. You cap your spending at a maximum of 75% of your income. You mandate a minimum of 15% for investments and then 10% for savings.
What's the underlying mechanism there, though? Like, why those specific numbers?
It's really designed to defeat lifestyle creep. By automating that 15% investment minimum, you guarantee your wealth generation outpaces inflation.
It just takes the decision fatigue right out of it.
Exactly. And as your income grows, your 75% spending bucket naturally gets bigger, so you still get to enjoy your success. But it forces your wealth-building engine to scale up at the exact same time.
So you don't just sink every new dollar into, like, a massive 30-year fixed mortgage.
Right, because as the video points out, the first 15 years of a 30-year mortgage are heavily front-loaded with interest. You're mostly just making the banker rich, not yourself.
Yeah, and that desire to over-leverage a house or a car.
Yeah.
It reveals a much deeper psychological flaw. And Housel explores how this fake rich trap, this endless hunger for more status, it scales all the way up to the very top of the economic food chain.
Oh, absolutely. He has an entire chapter on the concept of never enough.
Yeah, look at Rajat Gupta. This guy was the CEO of McKinsey. He sat on the board of Goldman Sachs, and he's worth an estimated $100 million.
You literally never have to worry about anything ever again with $100 million.
Never. But he existed in this social circle of billionaires. So sitting on $100 million made him feel totally inadequate.
Which is insane to think about.
Right. So he resorts to insider trading to bridge the gap. He gets caught, goes to federal prison, and just destroys his entire legacy.
Or Bernie Madoff. I mean, before the whole Ponzi scheme blew up, Madoff ran a highly profitable, totally legitimate market-making business. It generated tens of millions of dollars a year.
But it wasn't enough.
No, it wasn't. Warren Buffett actually talked about these exact scenarios. He noted that people routinely risk what they have and need for what they don't have and don't need.
I wonder, though, and maybe I'm playing devil's advocate here, but doesn't capitalism inherently rely on that constant comparison?
How do you mean?
Well, if we completely stop looking at our neighbor's BMW, or if an entrepreneur stops looking at their competitor's market share, don't we lose the drive to innovate? Like, doesn't ambition require us to keep moving the goalpost?
Sure, ambition is crucial for progress. But Housel makes a really vital distinction when it comes to personal wealth. The ceiling of social comparison is impossibly high.
It's an unwinnable game.
Completely unwinnable. Think about a rookie baseball player making, say, $500,000 a year. By any normal metric, he is incredibly wealthy.
Oh, for sure.
But he shares a locker room with Mike Trout, who has a $430 million contract.
Wow.
So suddenly, the rookie feels completely broke. But then Mike Trout compares his $36 million annual salary to a top hedge fund manager who clears $340 million in a single year.
And the hedge fund manager looks at Warren Buffett.
Exactly. The ladder literally never ends. If your definition of success is simply more than the next guy, you are basically guaranteeing your own misery. You have to establish your own definition of enough.
I love that. Enough isn't settling, it's like a defensive mechanism. It protects you from the regret of overreaching.
Beautifully put.
So if chasing status and moving goalposts leads to ruin, we have to look at what actually builds the lasting wealth we saw in that janitor, Ronald Reed. And the answer isn't hitting the jackpot on a hot stock tip. It's fundamentally about time.
Time and survival. Housel uses this brilliant analogy from climatology to explain this.
Okay, lay it on me.
So for centuries, scientists debated what caused the Earth to repeatedly freeze over into ice ages. They assumed it required some apocalyptic event, right? Like a violently freezing winter or massive volcanic eruptions blocking out the sun.
Right, something dramatic.
Exactly. But a meteorologist named Vladimir Kupin figured out it was actually the exact opposite. It was moderately cool summers.
Wait, cool summers caused the entire planet to freeze?
Yeah, a summer that is just barely cool enough that it fails to melt the previous winter's snow.
Oh, I see.
That means the next winter starts with a base layer of ice. That ice reflects more sunlight, which cools the Earth a tiny bit more, which attracts more snow the following year.
It just stacks.
Yep. That leftover snow compounds over thousands of years into miles-thick ice sheets. You don't need tremendous violent force to create staggering results. You just need a modest amount of growth that is never interrupted.
That uninterrupted growth is like the absolute core of Warren Buffett's wealth.
Yeah.
Because the math behind his net worth is just mind-bending.
It really is.
At the time Housel's book was published, Buffett's net worth was roughly $84.5 billion. Of that, $81.5 billion came after his 65th birthday.
Just let that sink in for a second.
It's crazy.
It is, because look at Jim Simons, the legendary hedge fund manager. He actually achieved a drastically higher annual return than Buffett. Simons averaged 66% a year, while Buffett averaged roughly 22%.
Okay, but Simons didn't end up richer.
No, Simons ended up 75% less wealthy than Buffett.
Wow.
Because Simons didn't find his investment stride until he was 50 years old. Buffett started investing when he was 10. The secret engine of that wealth isn't just picking the right stocks, it's maximizing the time horizon.
Which directly challenges the urge to treat the stock market like a casino. The Minority Mindset video highlights impatient investing as this massive pitfall.
Oh yeah, people don't want to wait 30 years to get rich, so they YOLO their savings into highly volatile meme stocks or day trading.
But the problem is, when you take on that level of risk, you inevitably hit a blowout. And the moment your account hits zero, you interrupt the compounding process.
Your ice melts.
Exactly. You have to invest your money to beat inflation, sure, but you have to do it in a way that guarantees you stay in the game, like broad market index funds.
This is where Housel introduces the dichotomy of getting wealthy versus staying wealthy, and they require completely contradictory skill sets.
How so?
Getting wealthy requires risk, right? It takes optimism, swinging for the fences, but staying wealthy requires paranoia, frugality, and the constant fear that it could all be taken away.
Oh, like Jesse Livermore in 1929.
Yes, the perfect example. He was this legendary stock trader who accurately shorted the market during the Great Crash. While other millionaires, like Abraham Germansky, were completely wiped out, Livermore made the equivalent of $3 billion in a single week.
So he navigated the ultimate crisis perfectly.
He did. But he couldn't switch from getting wealthy to staying wealthy. His success gave him an invincibility complex. He took on massive debt to make bigger bets. And by 1933, he had lost the entire $3 billion and eventually took his own life.
God, that's tragic.
It really is. To survive, you need what Housel calls a barbelled personality. You must be wildly optimistic about the long-term trajectory of the economy, but relentlessly paranoid about surviving the short-term shocks.
Yeah, balancing that long-term optimism with short-term paranoia is so hard to internalize. But Housel offers this striking biological analogy.
Oh, the brain synapses.
Yeah. Imagine a parent looking inside the brain of their 20-year-old child.
Wow.
By age 20, a human brain has lost roughly half the synaptic connections it had at age 2.
Half of them are just gone.
Right. And if you literally watched your child's brain cells dying off every single day, you would panic. You'd rush them to the hospital. But that synaptic pruning is the normal, necessary biological path of human progress. It clears out inefficiencies to make the brain faster.
Destruction as a prerequisite for progress.
Exactly. Look at the last 170 years of United States history. We've endured 33 recessions, 99.9% of all companies created have gone bankrupt, and millions have died in wars and pandemics.
It sounds awful when you list it out like that.
It does. If you only zoom in on the short-term news, you see continuous tragedy and destruction. Yet, over that exact same timeline, the standard of living increased 20-fold. You have to structure your finances to survive the short-term destruction so you can stick around for the long-term progress.
And surviving that destruction really forces us to confront an uncomfortable reality, about how much control we actually have. If you're in the game for decades, you're going to encounter massive failures.
It's just mathematical.
Right. And this is where Housel's concepts of luck and risk come into play. We are culturally obsessed with the idea that every outcome is tied directly to individual effort.
And we want a clean narrative of cause and effect.
We really do. But reality is so much messier. Housel uses the doppelganger story of Bill Gates and Ken Evans.
Okay, remind me about Ken Evans.
So, Bill Gates had 1 in a million luck. He happened to attend Lakeside School in Seattle in 1968, which was virtually the only high school in the world with a computer terminal.
Wow, yeah.
That extreme stroke of luck gave him the head start to build Microsoft. But his best friend, Kent Evans, who was equally brilliant and ambitious, he experienced 1 in a million bad luck.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he died in a mountaineering accident before graduation. Both boys were subjected to these powerful forces entirely outside of their own effort.
The cognitive dissonance here is fascinating, though. When we experience failure, we're very quick to attribute it to bad luck or a bad market. Oh, the economy was bad. But when we look at someone else's failure, we judge it as a bad decision or a lack of discipline. We refuse to accept that risk and luck are literally two sides of the same coin.
And acknowledging that lack of control is essential because it prepares you for the mathematical reality of tails. You win.
Yes, the long tails.
In finance and business, long tails, the extreme 1 in 1,000 outliers, they drive almost all outcomes. Heinz Berggruen is a great example. He was a legendary art dealer who built a billion-dollar collection.
People thought he was a genius at picking artists, right?
Exactly, like some kind of savant. In reality, he just bought massive quantities of art. He knew 99% of it would likely be worthless, but the 1% that turned out to be Picasso's generated his entire fortune.
We see this across every industry. Look at Walt Disney. He was financially drowning, having produced over 400 cartoons that mostly lost money.
400.
400. The entire company was saved by the massive tail event success of one movie, Snow White.
That's crazy.
And in venture capital, funds expect 80% of their startups to fail. They rely on 0.5% of their investments to drive all of their returns. Even in the broad stock market, if you look at the Russell 3000 index over a 30-year period, 40% of the companies lose at least 70% of their value and never recover.
But the winners make up for it.
Exactly. 7% of the companies perform so phenomenally well, they drive all the gains for the entire index.
So you can be wrong half the time and still make a total fortune.
But hold on, let's reconcile this for a second. If tails drive everything, if you have to endure 99 failures to get the one Picasso, or 400 failed cartoons to get a Snow White, how does that differ from the minority mindset warning against Vegas-style investing?
Okay.
Because if we're throwing money at hundreds of things expecting most to fail, aren't we just gambling?
It's a great question. The distinction lies in the mechanism of sizing your bets. Vegas gambling is pushing all your chips to the center of the table on one spin of the roulette wheel. If you lose, your capital is gone and you are physically removed from the casino.
Game over.
Exactly. Tail event investing is about survivability. A venture capitalist doesn't put 50% of their fund into one unproven software company. They put 1% into 100 companies.
Right.
They are fully expecting the majority of those specific bets to fail, but they size them so that no single failure threatens their foundation. It's making calculated micro bets to ensure you can stay at the table long enough for the math of the long tail to eventually work in your favor.
So it's about absorbing localized losses while protecting your overall survival.
Precisely.
That really brings everything we've talked about full circle. We've dissected the newbie errors of high-interest debt, the psychological traps of lifestyle creep, the mechanics of uninterrupted compounding, and this reality of tail risk investing.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
Yeah.
But we needed to find the end point. For you, the person listening to this right now, mapping out your own finances, what is the ultimate purpose of all this discipline? Like, what are we actually optimizing for?
For Morgan Housel, the answer boils down to a single concept: freedom. The absolute highest dividend that money pays is the ability to wake up every single morning and say, I can do whatever I want today.
That's powerful.
It is. He points to the extensive psychological research of Angus Campbell, who really tried to find the common denominator of human happiness.
And what was it?
Well, it wasn't an executive salary. It wasn't a specific geographic location or a certain square footage in a house. The most dependable predictor of positive well-being was a strong sense of having control over one's life.
That need for autonomy is so deeply wired into us. Psychologists actually refer to it as reactance.
Right, react.
And it's this phenomenon where being forced to do something you naturally love, but doing it on a schedule dictated by someone else, it feels exactly the same as doing something you absolutely hate.
Yeah, if you lose control of your time, you lose the joy of the activity.
And this ties seamlessly into the minority mindset's point about investing in yourself. The video highlights real estate investors who refuse to hire a property manager for 8% of the rent, or, professionals who won't spend $500 on a course that could dramatically increase their earning power.
Right, because they think they're saving money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But by hoarding those pennies, they're actively trapping their own time. They become slaves to managing tenant complaints or their own inefficiencies. They cap their own growth because they fundamentally undervalue their sovereignty.
Think about your own financial decisions through that lens. Managing your money isn't about perfectly optimizing a spreadsheet. It certainly isn't about acquiring luxury goods just to convince your neighbors that you're important.
Nope.
It is entirely about buying your own sovereignty. It's about building a wide enough margin of safety, crawling, walking, then running, so you don't have to tolerate a toxic boss. So you don't panic when an unexpected medical bill arrives.
You are using money to buy options. You're using money to buy your own time.
It's the cognitive shift from seeing wealth as a vehicle for acquiring possessions to seeing wealth as a vehicle for acquiring autonomy.
That is the perfect distillation of the behavioral landscape.
Yeah.
But it does leave us with one final, maybe slightly provocative thought to mull over.
Okay, let's hear it.
If money's greatest utility is buying you total sovereignty over your schedule, does achieving absolute financial freedom risk stripping away the very external pressures, the bosses, the deadlines, the obligations that actually give your life structure and meaning?
Oh, wow.
Because once you can genuinely do whatever you want, whenever you want, the real challenge becomes figuring out who you are when no one is telling you what to do. It turns out that clean, perfectly precise mathematical formula we all wish finance could be, it just doesn't exist. Because money isn't a spreadsheet, it's a mirror.
A mirror reflecting our deepest behaviors, our blind spots, and our core values.
We'll leave you to look in that mirror until next time.